Hello, thank you for joining me for part 4 of Dinner with Lazarus, a series of devotionals based on John chapter 12. Today we're going to be talking about the very public nature of the raising of Lazarus, which happened a chapter before but set up everything coming in John chapter 12. The raising of Lazarus was an event that was not something hidden, not something that was only seen by Mary and Martha, Lazarus' sisters, but it was witnessed by a group of people. And the Bible makes that clear. In chapter 11, verse 19, it refers to many Jews coming to console Mary and Martha about their brother who had passed. And then later in the chapter, in verse 41, 42, 43, Jesus is just about to raise Lazarus from the dead, but he prays to the Father first. And he says, "Thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd around me, I say this." So Jesus refers to the fact that there was a crowd surrounding him at the gravesite when he raised Lazarus from the dead. Why is this important? Well, it's important only because there's a world of people for a long period of time who have sought to diminish anything miraculous in the New Testament, anything that would testify to the reality that Jesus is the Son of God. That's really tough to do, though, with the New Testament, because God has given such incredible evidence for the reality, the historicity of the New Testament information. This is a perfect example of that. D.A. Carson, a famous theologian, actually who taught at our denomination's seminary and is now an emeritus professor there, but very highly respected author of many commentaries, dates the book of John, in other words, the writing of the book, at somewhere around 85 AD. So what we're dealing with here is a situation where when the book was written and circulated, there was a high probability that people were still alive who witnessed the actual raising of Lazarus. It's awfully hard to falsify information when there are still living witnesses. And so it will be as if we try to falsify some event that happened in 1970 or thereabouts. Well, there would be plenty of people who could verify many of the events of 1970. And so if we tried to tell a lie about them, a lie about an event that was witnessed by a crowd of people back then, we would certainly have people that would refute the falsification. And the same goes here with the raising of Lazarus. Very interesting. There's another aspect of John chapter 12, which speaks to the fact, or John chapter 11 rather, that speaks to the fact that this was a historical fact. And that is, there were some unwilling testimonies to what happened. I say unwilling because these people didn't appreciate Jesus. In fact, when they witnessed Lazarus being raised from the dead, as we've spoken about in a different segment of Dinner with Lazarus, they ran to the Pharisees and said, "Jesus just raised someone from the dead. This is a problem because people are going to follow him left and right." And in fact, they did. Many people came to the dinner with Lazarus in John chapter 12 looking to meet Jesus, looking to meet Lazarus who'd been raised from the dead, because those who had seen the miracle had testified to it. And so many were starting to follow Jesus because of this. But there were these unwilling people who were testifying to the event. And evidence that that is true is the response of the Pharisees was, "We've got to kill Jesus and Lazarus." And it was just days later when they brought Jesus to the Roman authorities to have him crucified. And so the report, the desired outcome because of the report, came true days later, further strengthening the fact that of the truth of John's testimony, that there were those who ran to the Pharisees with this information. People who did not approve of Jesus, did not follow Jesus, were some of the stronger witnesses to this event. So, very interesting stuff in the day we live, to know that our faith is always based on very historically solid information. The New Testament was written largely by eyewitnesses or close associates of those eyewitnesses. And so this is another case where you can share with others with confidence, and you can share with them some of the information that shows that the New Testament is so reliable in what it shares. I'd like to share one more thing about John chapter 12. This is a series from John chapter 12. I'd like to talk about verse 32 in John chapter 12, where Jesus is talking about his own impending death. And I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself. I wanted to bring this up because Jesus knew it was coming, and out of great love for us, he was willing to suffer it. But he said that being raised up from the earth on the cross, a reference to his death, that would draw man to himself. There is something about the love of Christ displayed on the cross that draws hearts to Jesus. Remember that as you talk to people about Jesus. Start with the cross and what it was for. That Jesus sacrificially, lovingly, was scourged and abused and then crucified and nailed to a cross because he loves you. That's a great way to start a conversation about Jesus. Jesus told us it would draw people. Let's believe that. Thank you for joining me for part number 4 of Dinner with Lazarus.